know is that these kids don't snap. These are not spontaneous events. These are not events that we would consider hot-blooded or emotional violence. We typically, in the forensic world, look at violence in two ways: emotional violence or hot-blooded violence, and predatory violence or cold-blooded violence. And we know that, lo and behold, most of these kids, a vast majority of them, this is predatory violence. This is violence where they seek out advantage points, tactical advantage points. They look for ways of gaining entry into the facility. They plan this out sometimes for years. And there's several cases where they plan these out for years, many at least for months. Most of these kids have no drugs in their system, certainly no illicit drugs. And in fact, what's the number one drug that's in most of these kids' system after they attack, when we do autopsies or we do drug testing on them, the ones that don't suicide? What's the number one medication, drug in their system? Antidepressants. Schools, in terms of hard perimeters that are most prepared for these events, urban schools, where there are metal detectors, where there are armed security people, armed police officers, are everywhere. At the end of the day, detection is the most important part of this equation, because you can't assess a level of risk if you haven't detected that there is a risk, that someone has been identified as a potential risk. You can't manage that person's risk if you haven't identified that there's a risk. So lo and behold, the most important part of this is detection. The goal is to intervene before it becomes actionable. We don't want to intervene here. We want to intervene here. We want to intervene before there's a risk of an intervention, but they already have enough of the plan in place where it accelerates their plan. Nothing. In my world, one piece of data means nothing. I'm a scientist, and I approach this all very scientifically, as does others in my community, professional predecessors. We look at one piece of data as interesting. Two pieces of data, a little more interesting. But when you start to get 3 and 4 and 5 pieces of data, we now have what we call convergent validity. Things all coming together, saying the same thing. Is there enough data here to be concerned? The 3 biggest issues that we find with these shooters is bullying, or peer victimization, which they develop a grievance, history of having access to weapons, and depression with suicidal ideation. That's the hat trick, all 3 of those together. Depression with suicidal ideation is a big one. So, again, the importance of bullying, let's look at that for a second. 75% of the cases, 75%, 3 out of 4, cite bullying as a motive. That alone is enough to address the issue of bullying. And here's the other thing, and I get so many people who will say, but Dr. Bernstein, I've seen that kid, they're not bullied, they're too sensitive. And what's my response? I don't care what you think. It's not you who's perceiving this. He's perceiving this, she's perceiving this. If a kid feels they're being marginalized and bullied, they're going to respond as if they're being marginalized and bullied, regardless of what anybody else sees. And that's how we have to understand this. And also some of the impact on mental health, which even if it doesn't result in a school attack, it's horrible.